What is a market crisis anyway? There's a lot of talk about market crisis, and I have a feeling it's becoming a word, an excuse actually for people to do things that they shouldn't be doing. Yesterday, I listened to an interview on Macro Musings, which is a pretty good podcast, gives you a good sense for what's going on in Washington, how people think in Washington and around the Fed. So there's these people, I don't care about names, but scholars, people that I think these people actually work for Geithner. There's an institute at Yale that deals with how people should deal with crisis. And just to be very blunt, I think all this Northeastern people, this Northeast Coast mentality of sort of, well, we're the shepherds and you're the sheep, and we'll figure out how to guide you, so don't worry. And of course, pay us enough, so we'll do that. I think it's just terrible. It's almost depressing that this is even possible in the United States, and we're still living in this basically in this concept of a northeastern elite running the country. It's terrible, and this is a good example because they're saying things like, well, if there's a market crisis, then we have to do like basically fire extinguisher. We have to get involved and intervene, and then when things are normal, we can let the market run. But either they're stupid or they're just very cutthroat because obviously Econ 101, behavioral science 101 will tell you that anybody who expects the Fed or the government to intervene in crisis will act always as if this intervention will happen, even when there's no crisis. So the concept of moral hazard is just preeminent. And I think these leaders, these elitists on the Northeast, DC and Boston and a little bit Manhattan, they just take this as an excuse to run the country, and it's terrible. And I wish we could change that. And the libertarian movement, people like Peter Thiel, the New Conservatism, all of these movements are the right way to deal with this, because this is not about what's right or wrong in terms of should we do this policy or that. This is just fundamentally wrong to have people make decisions on behalf of other people and cross boundaries that they shouldn't be crossing, and then create laws afterwards to justify them, because this is, in a nutshell, particularly what the financial establishment is doing. What Geithner did in 2008, together with Obama and Bernanke, was basically throw capitalism out of the bathwater. They became the arbiters of success and failure. They, of course, bailed out the banks, which was politically attacked, but more fundamentally, they introduced a lot more moral hazard into the economy than before, and that is, to me, that's a big crime. I mean, that at least it's bad, if not a crime. So I want to talk about this in this episode, particularly with the concept of the three big concepts that I think are important in economics and in general in life, which is moral hazard, the free rider problem, and the principal agent problem. This is Not Even Wrong podcast. It's September 20th, 2022. This is Krim Dalko. For today, the fund is up 1.6%. The market is down 2%. For the year, we're down 23.6%. The market is down 19.2%. We're underperforming by 3.4%. We had a massive outperformance in the last 2 weeks, driven by Tesla and a little bit by our biotech index. I think the Tesla fundamentals are just still very good. The China risk is there, but other than that, the fundamentals are just good. The demand is strong. We just ordered a new car, our used car. Hopefully, will get us a lot of money, and we can get a new car for relatively little money. So the demand for these cars is just very strong, and that's I think driving the stock. And this is what Warren Buffett, I guess, means when he says, in the long run, the market's a weighing machine. In the short run, a voting machine. The weight of Tesla as a company, as a profit-generating, cash flow-generating, and innovation-generating company is just too big to be ignored. And this is what's happening right now. This outperformance that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, hopefully will continue. And we have the macro backdrop, which is higher rates, much higher rates, because inflation is just not under control yet. So this particular episode now is for new listeners. We sometimes digress a bit. We talk about books, we talk about literature, we talk about theory, economics, we discuss Clayton Christensen in depth and other books. So we do a lot of these things because we talk a lot about epistemology here, because epistemology is the science of knowledge, and we're in the knowledge business. So I'm actually surprised that not more hedge funds and generally investment managers are more interested in epistemology, because because it helps to think sometimes, well, what is it we're actually doing, and how do we actually generate knowledge, and what is the risk of knowledge, and what is knowledge, and all these questions. That's why David Deutsch is part of our principal stack, which is the sort of the foundation of our fund. But now let's talk about these three concepts that I think are fundamental in economics. It's the principal agent problem, the moral hazard, and the free rider problem. And I want to particularly focus on the moral hazard problem today because, again, I'm talking about people. Again, I don't need to mention names, it doesn't matter, but there's a lot of people, particularly in the Northeast establishment, coming out of universities such as Yale and Princeton and all that stuff. They just think that they have the right to shepherd this country, to run this country, to lead this country. And the problem is, there's nothing wrong with leaders. There's nothing wrong with people taking action. I'm very much in favor of people actually going out of their way, taking action, taking risk. All of that stuff is good. The problem is you have to earn that. You have to earn that, and the best way to earn that is by creating a company or making money in a honest, fair, capitalist way, where you take a risk, you create a product or a service that helps other people, they pay for it, you become rich. This is fine. People like Bezos, Musk, Gates, I'm fine with them. What I'm not fine is some guy who goes to some university and somehow ends up on a Fed board chip, or even works for an investment bank, and then somehow is entitled to let's say rescue people during a crisis. This is what I'm not okay with. And the problem is, I'm not even interested in the moral philosophy of that it's unfair and all that, because I don't really know what fairness it really means. That's not the point. The point is, these people are throwing capitalism out of the bathwater, or they're throwing the baby out of the bathwater, as the saying says, which means that in order to, let's say, salvage a crisis, in order to just maybe survive another 6 months without a market crash or something like that, they just really introduce moral hazard at a scale that is very detrimental to the economy. There's a quote from the Macro Museum's podcast this week. There's this person that supposedly is doing research on how to deal with market crisis, and he says something like, "Well, you should be doing policies and all that stuff during good times, and in market crisis you should just intervene and save people," or something like that. And I mean, this is, like I said in the prelude, it's either stupid or deliberately misleading. And the reason it's like that is the following. What I think is it's just prevalent here is this attitude of, well, we're going to intervene when we decide it's necessary. And that creates this expectations in the market that, well, that means they're going to intervene, right? So we can lever ourselves up. We can do all these kinds of stupid things because they will, in the end, save us. This is, your child keeps doing the wrong thing. You keep threatening, but you never really do anything about it. So they'll want to keep doing whatever they're doing. So this is the same concept, and it's bad for the economy. It creates a big bloated sector of useless people doing useless things. Actually, those people probably they're not useless by nature. I think everybody wants to do good things, but I think fundamentally people just become lazy and complacent when they can, and this is part of that process. And so Peter Thiel says that California has the technology curse. I think the U.S. has the dollar curse, because our currency is the reserve currency. We can afford all this laziness and complacency, and it's not going to end well. We can't compete with people like China if we have people like this person sitting somewhere in Yale trying to manage the economy from there. This is not going to work. Now, our advantage relative to China actually is freedom. I mean, I would say the only advantage we have is freedom. Everything else they have the manpower, they have the work ethic, they have the capital, but they don't have freedom. That's why we are better than them. That's why they come here. That's why their kids are coming here. That's why not. Otherwise, we would be going there. But it's not like that, because there's no freedom there. And without freedom, there's no wealth creation. There's nothing. Totalitarian regimes always end up in war. There's no other way. That's how they're designed. That's what they do. So, versus free societies are implicitly designed to create wealth. Maybe not explicitly, meaning our founding fathers might not have actually written that in the Constitution, but by writing the blueprint for freedom, you are you are technically writing the blueprint for wealth creation, because freedom and wealth creation are the same thing. It's the same coin, just two sides of the coin. So anyway, let's get back to this concept of crisis. So what is a crisis? You see, what is a crisis? Like, who decides what a crisis is? A crisis is, yeah, it's a volatility, or people collapse, banks collapse, whatever it is. And, my point here is that, again, having a rule-based economy with clear rules. Look, for example, sorry for the digression here, but if I had a rule, let's say that, well, I sometimes walk into Whole Foods, and when I have a crisis, I just steal. I kill the cashier and steal the food because I have a crisis. So I just need to do that to survive, right? But otherwise, I'll be fine, right? I mean, that's not tenable. It's crazy. You can't live. Or imagine the other way around. Like, Whole Foods sometimes decides to kill me, or not kill me, but torture me, because they just run out of something, and they need to squeeze some money out of me, just in a crisis, of course. Usually they won't do that. I mean, again, stupid, absurd, but this is kind of what this is. Like, well, what do you mean in a crisis you're gonna tramp over the rules and change the rules and do things that are not even legal, just to do what? To save somebody or save something? It's not healthy. It's not healthy. It's bad. It's just not the right way to proceed. And therefore, I think we should all just step back a little bit, and try to work towards a more rule-based, less interventionist economy. Now, I think Bitcoin is the solution for that, and that's why we're very, very interested in Bitcoin. We own 5% of our assets are actually owned in Bitcoin, but we're kind of leaning more towards what Alice Kayleen, I think is her name, is propagating. A big fan of hers. What even that guy, the Palestinian guy, I can't pronounce his name. What he's talking about. So the Austrian economics perspective of Bitcoin, we're not that extreme. I mean, Austrian economics is 100 years old. It had some good ideas, and there's certainly room for improvement, but the fundamental principles still hold, which is that money, excuse me, economic activity is really about optimizing your time preference, and there's no free lunch and all that stuff, and any kind of intervention or so-called crisis management, or whatever you want to call it, in the end is just redistribution of money. That's all there is. There's nothing else to you can call it whatever you want. So redistribution of money can happen, but it has to happen in some sort of checks and balance process. And if you have something like the Fed, or scholars like this guy sitting somewhere in Yale and taking the right to start deciding what we should do in a crisis, it's just sick. It's not good. It's very bad. I would call this a cancer. Even that ideas like that are propagated, and of course, on the northeast side of this country, the institutions there are even built on that. So of course, if you're at Harvard or Yale or whatever, you're not even going to. I mean, that's why you exist. That's why you were put in place 300 years ago. But times have changed. So we have different perspectives now on this. I think fundamentally, the absolute first thing we need to optimize for is freedom, always. And we have to take the risk of failure, the risk of a correction into account. That's part of it. That's part of volatility. Is not some sort of external bad thing happen, like a hurricane or something. It is part of it. It's implicit. It's endogenous. It's a feature of the system, not a bug, if you will. That's very important. Volatility is a feature, not a bug. In order to achieve wealth and freedom and progress, we have to deal with corrections. That's what error correction is all about. It's Popper is all about. And now, if we can we might have some knowledge in the future about some sort of economic system that can progress without volatility. We just don't have that right now, because we don't have enough information. We don't have enough information about all the things. We're not Laplacian demons or something. Maybe if we could predict much better what's going to happen, we could reduce volatility. But then I guess even in a society like that, volatility would increase, because then our expectations would increase and our lifestyles would be much higher, and so on and so forth. But as we speak now, volatility is really a function of our knowledge. Okay, what is it we know about the future? What can we predict? And the more knowledge we create, the more innovation, by definition, the more volatility we're going to have, because there's more new things coming, and more new things means volatility. But this is also Nassim Taleb, anti-fragility, right? The more volatility we have, that's fine. Volatility is okay. It stabilizes the system. By preventing it, by pretending it doesn't exist, we're actually creating this fragile system that for a long time is stable and then collapses. And then we have people like Geithner and these people in Yale sitting there and telling us that they need to do research in how to deal in crisis. Well, why do you have to do something about the crisis? How about we try to design ourselves in a way that we know that there's volatility? So, for example, we limit the leverage, because the fundamental problem with volatility is leverage. I can attest that as a fund manager. That's the only thing I care about when it comes to volatility. I don't care about volatility. I can be wrong. I can certainly be wrong when I invest, and I can buy something that goes down. But that's a feature of my business. But the one thing I can't control, and this is also Lars Peter Hansen talks about, this Nobel Prize winning economist in Chicago. Well, there's this external, these exogenous macroeconomic factors. They create volatility that we can't hedge against. I don't know what he exactly means with that. I met him last week. I should have asked him. Is he talk about wars, nuclear wars, asteroids, or does he talk about the endogenous volatility that macroeconomic cycles bring with? I don't know, but anyway, and it's an open question if you can hedge or not hedge against macro shocks. To me, that's an open question. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is leverage. You know, people talk a lot about volatility. People talk a lot about what is money and what the Fed should do and blah, blah, blah. In the end, the only thing that cares for an individual or a company or a country is how much do I owe? Because when volatility hits, then there's this negative operating leverage. When things go down, when your assets go down, and people have claims on your assets, then you have nothing left. They take it away from you. This is the problem, and you have to deal with that problem. So to summarize again, I'm ranting a bit about an attitude that is prevalent on the northeast side of the U.S., which is this idea that we are the shepherds and we just run the country, and we use crisis as a pretext to start introducing rules and even laws that allow us to intervene more and more in the economy. And that's bad. That's a cancer. It needs to stop. We need a more rule-based economy. And if they don't come up with it, then hopefully the Bitcoin movement and the idea behind Bitcoin can prevail, because this, to me, is the actual solution to all these problems. The moral hazard problem, the free riding problem, and the principal agent problem. It is something like Bitcoin, a network that is decentralized, that nobody controls, that says it the way it is, that decides what is, that solves for identity, and by the way, also solves for hard money. Thank you.